All right. Hi, everyone. Kelsey Erickson Streufert here with the TRA for another really exciting legislative town hall. Today, we've got El Paso and Southwest Texas covered with several very important guests. We're incredibly grateful that they took some of their busy day to spend some time with us and to really hear about the issues that restaurants across the state are facing. So I'm just going to dive in with their bios, give them a chance to address us, and then we'll jump into questions. Reminder for anyone watching, if you've got a question that we haven't addressed, make sure you type it in the chat feature, and we'll be monitoring that as we go. So without further ado, our first guest is Senator Pete Flores. Senator Flores was elected in a special election in September 2018, becoming the first Hispanic Republican to serve in the Texas Senate. In his first session, Senator Flores was very busy serving on 5 committees: Finance, Health and Human Services, Criminal Justice, Higher Education, and Natural Resources and Economic Development. He's also been appointed to the Redistricting Committee, which should be interesting this next session. Prior to joining the Senate, Senator Flores served as a game warden here in Texas for 27 years, earning the rank of colonel. Senator Flores was raised in South Texas, graduating from Laredo Martin High School and then attending Laredo Junior College before transferring and graduating from Texas A&M and College Station. We won't hold his Aggie status against him today, however.
A whoop in there, a whoop.
Senator Flores is also a graduate of the Governor's Economic Development School from the LBJ School of Government at UT Austin, so there we go, and is a fellow of the National Conservation Leadership Institute. He lives in Pleasanton with his wife Elizabeth and has 2 daughters and 2 grandsons. Senator Flores, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to you for any introductory remarks you'd like to make.
So I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to visit with you all and representatives. It's always great to see you, and thank you for working together for the better of Texas and for the Restaurant Association. Again, thank you. I'm a big supporter of restaurants, and I realize how much you feed Texas. And great part of I know of my income and others that I know goes to the restaurants, and I understand, speaking with my restaurant owners across the district, both in the big city and the small towns, that most of that is very labor intensive, very expensive, but it's also a lot of labor of love, or they wouldn't be in the business. And so we want to be able to do everything we can to make sure that those restaurants, small businesses, which are the backbone of business in Texas, stay open.
Thank you so much, Senator. So next, we've got Representative Joe Moody. Representative Moody represents Texas House District 78, which is a mixed urban and rural district covering much of northern El Paso County. He currently serves as Speaker Pro Tem of the Texas House, as well as Vice Chair of the Calendars Committee and a member of the Committees on Business and Industry, Redistricting, and Criminal Jurisprudence. Representative Moody is a lifelong El Pasoan and has followed the example of public service set by his father, who was a district judge, and his mother, who was an El Paso school teacher. He was first elected to the Texas House in 2008, making him the youngest state representative at the time. Outside of the Texas legislature, Representative Moody is an attorney. He served as a prosecutor for many years at the El Paso County DA's office before entering private practice. He lives in El Paso with his wife, Adrienne, and has 2 adorable sons who are regular contributors to his social media posts. Representative Moody, thank you so much for being with us today, and would love to hear any opening remarks you have to share with us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you doing this and inviting us to be on here. And if you want updates on my children as they keep me entertained and distracted from the stresses of the day, you can find them on my Twitter feed, which is @Moody for El Paso. I'll give myself a plug there. It's restaurants are so family oriented. I mean, it really has hit home I think this pandemic has hit home for people in a lot of different ways, but you realize what's normal, kind of what feels normal in your life, right? And so I know my kids are 6 and 4, right? They know their favorite places, their favorite dishes. They like this, they have a routine, you know, on Friday they get to go, pick where they want to go. And so that's, that life, I mean, when this industry was essentially disappeared for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, those routines in our lives all went away too. And we're a family that we're not employed by, we're not working in. And so that was a small disruption for us, but for those that run them, who work in them, the food service, all the industries that intersect with the restaurants are completely, just thrown for a loop. And it's certainly not lost on me that as we navigate our way out of this, I don't know where we are in that journey right now. And I think that's up to anybody's guess. But as we navigate our way out of this, everything we do in the legislature, and certainly grateful for the leadership of Representative Gonzalez and Senator Flores on many issues. As we navigate our way out of this on the legislative side, everything we do should look like a recovery package, whether that's the budget, a suite of bills that we're passing. Everything should be about the Texas recovery as we head into 2021 and beyond. And the restaurant industry needs to play no small part in that. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I like that. I'm going to steal some of that messaging, the recovery agenda. I like it. All right. Last but certainly not least, we have Representative Mary Gonzalez, elected in November 2012 to represent House District 75, which covers East El Paso County and the town of Clint, where Representative Gonzalez was raised. Representative Gonzalez serves on the Appropriations Committee, which writes the budget, the Public Education Committee, and is vice chair of the Local and Consent Calendars Committee. In addition to her committees, Representative Gonzalez is currently serving on several legislative caucuses. She's vice chair of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, is on the House Border Caucus, and is chair of the new Texas House LGBTQ Caucus. Representative Gonzalez received her bachelor's degree from the University of Texas at Austin, again, hook 'em horns, and her master's degree from St. Ed's. She also has a doctoral degree in curriculum and instruction, cultural studies, and education at UT Austin. Previously, she has worked at the National Hispanic Institute, the University of Texas at Austin. We're seeing a bit of a theme here, which I quite appreciate. And is the Assistant Dean for Student Multicultural Affairs at Southwestern University. Representative, thank you so much for joining us today, and would love to hear any opening remarks you've got to share.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm super excited to be talking with some of my favorite people, Speaker Moody and Senator Flores. I think these are some people who are truly committed to serving the interests of Texas and our constituents, and so you won't find they're some of the most humble servant leaders we have, and so grateful to be on the call. And you're right, you should steal all of Joe Moody's messaging. He is the king of good messaging. So anybody, I'm just going to put this public service announcement, anybody who needs messaging, please call Joe Moody. But anyways, I feel very committed to the work that your organization does. I actually grew up in the restaurant world. My family, for those of you watching from El Paso, my name is Mary Edna González Calderon, and I grew up in a restaurant called Casa Calderon for most of my life, which was my grandfather's and then my mother's and her siblings. And so I just, we're talking, going off of what Joe said, is like how much restaurants are part of our cultural and familial tapestry. And so for me, that was completely my upbringing. And so we no longer have that restaurant after my grandfather passed away from diabetes, but I just know how critical it was to my whole family growing up in that whole time. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you to your members. I also, as a single person, rely a lot on restaurants. So I would not eat if it wasn't for y'all. So thank you so much.
I certainly appreciate that. I've been joking that my husband and I, who's also named Preston, speaking of Moody, we sometimes, I feel like we're solely keeping the Austin restaurant scene afloat. We're ordering takeout about every 6 hours at this point. So I certainly appreciate that. So let's jump into questions. I kind of just want to set the scene for a minute. And y'all know this, but our restaurants are really at a crossroads right now. You know, many of them benefited from the PPP program, not all, but many. For many, that was really a lifeline and a bridge. It allowed them to keep employees on payroll. But that money's run out at this point. They've spent it all. And it really is kind of coming at the worst time, because at the same time that money is sort of evaporated, you know, our cases spiked, and we went a little bit, you know, backwards on reopening, and kind of more importantly than that, even customers aren't coming out in the volume that they were, because of course they're concerned. So there's a lot of unknowns here for our restaurants, and at the same time they're seeing their revenue dip significantly. They don't know where the light at the end of the tunnel is, when that's coming. They don't know how they're going to keep their doors open, continue to employ their employees. Many of them have switched to takeout, but that's not a sustainable model for everyone. And it certainly doesn't bring in the same amount of revenue for most that dining in did. And so, you know, just kind of with that backdrop in mind, how do we help our restaurants keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other when there is so much uncertainty? And for many of them, they need kind of immediate relief and recovery in order to sustain their operations. Senator Flores, I'll start with you if you have anything to add on that.
Well, I can tell you that you know, a lot of my dear friends are restaurant owners, small restaurant owners, you know, large chains. But my daughter works in a restaurant here in Austin, and you know, and so you know, that's also close to home. We want to be able to do everything we can to open up our state as quickly and as responsibly as possible, and you know, especially recognizing the big need in our community of people, that there's a lot of folks that depend on the restaurants more than the HEBs and grocery stores for their primary source of food, so we want to be. I'm a big advocate of trying to, you know, assure that our businesses stay open and doing it responsibly and safely, but at the same time, you know, we're trying to remove any barriers that especially those that we may be imposing, that are contrary to having those vital businesses remain open. And for that, you know, we also have to depend on the restaurant tours and the restaurant association to inform us, as subject matter experts that you are, what those barriers or regulations or things are that are not conducive to them opening, and practices that are being allowed that weren't allowed before that are pretty much make good sense. You know, why are, you know, don't rescind them, but continue in them to, as the speaker said on recovery. I mean, if they're good practices, you know, allow that to continue. If it's a regulatory thing, well, regulation can be changed year to year. If it's a statutory thing, I'll work with my partners to be able to correct that. But the bottom line here is to keep those businesses open and keep, you know, those jobs in our communities. Put my daughter back to work. She's working now. We want to keep her working.
We do too. Yeah. On the same page on that one for sure. Representative Moody?
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of echoing that. I mean, government really can do a couple of things. I don't want to oversimplify it, right? But government can offer assistance, right? Or they can get out of the way, right? So I think we need to do both, right? And in the immediate moment that we're in now, right? And for last year, I've been working for a community bank here, and so we work through the PPP program with a lot of small businesses, many of them restaurants, understanding the situation they were in, and understanding also when you open up 25, 50% or whatever the case may be, it's not the first, you know, you're not turning a profit on the first 25% of the people that walk in the door. You know, it's not the first dollar that comes in, it's, you know, it's the last set of dollars. And so understanding that that complicated economic environment that they're working in, and the margins are usually pretty thin at that. I saw Leo Duran on here in the chat, and I've seen he's as creative a restaurateur as you can find here, and he'll do things to make sure that his customers are taken care of and follow the rules. But man, I don't know where you've seen other people get creative and set up outside, do what they can to do this. Leo, I don't know. I mean, in 105-degree heat in the summer in El Paso, next with not a lot of room on the sidewalk there. I mean, there's some places they don't have those options, right? So even if they're creative and want to work around these things, they don't have that ability. So you just need, to the extent that we have relief available, then we need to offer it the best we can, whether that's in grants or other low interest loans or forgivable loans or things of that nature. Let's start to phase the other ways that we can look at this. We receive money from the state side. Are there ways that we can utilize that for our business, for our businesses and our restaurants in that industry? And the other thing is getting out of the way, and that goes towards kind of what Senator Flores is talking about. Let's not tie hands. As we've seen restaurants turn their parking lots into movie theaters. Hell, I would never thought of that, but that's creativity. And so let's not hinder that. Let's not, if there's red tape that disallows things like that or other creative mechanisms to make sure that the businesses can flow, because we're going to steer out of this at some point. And so we all know that what we offer now in the immediate moment, and as we ramp back into regular normal life, whatever that is, these are the things that can be the difference in a business surviving and not. And so if there's red tape in the way of that creativity, let's get it out of the way. If there are ways that we can incentivize the creativity, we can do that too. So look at the funding, tie the two together. I'll leave it at that. But I mean, those are the kind of the two lanes that my mind travels down.
Great. We have ideas on both of those that we will dig into in more detail in a minute. But first, Representative Gonzalez, kick it over to you.
Oh, thank you. And so the great thing about being last, I'll say ditto to what the gentleman said ahead of me. And I want to say, I think what has really helped me as a legislator think through this issue is really the TRA's advocacy, right? That Leo sent an email to, I think Leo's going to be the superstar of this call. But Leo sent an email with some of the Texas restaurant survival plans. And there were some really great ideas in that really, so when you ask what can government be doing, one is we do and can always create programs that support the industry through this difficult time. And this is kind of like what Joe was talking about, providing that resource. And the second thing we could do is also confidence, right? Like, I'll be really honest, even though restaurants are open, I'm still doing takeout not because I don't trust the restaurants, but because of the other things that are happening around. And so if we make policies, the public needs to understand what are these policies grounded in, so that we can then build confidence so that people can start to be part of the economy in the ways that are healthy and safe. And so for me, those are the top two things, but on top of what the Senator and Speaker Moody said.
Hi, everyone. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Tauzen. I'm the Chief Revenue and Innovation Officer for TRA. But I really want to talk about what Representative Gonzalez just touched on around creating confidence with consumers, right? And one thing that we've seen, because part of my job is also to help us with media outreach, and sometimes defending our restaurants in the media as well. And there have been a lot of articles written about restaurants and bars, but let's focus on restaurants for now, about restaurants being blamed for additional exposure to COVID-19 from what we've seen, without any contact tracing results that actually say that. So it's an assumptive thing that because restaurants opened up on May 1st, and that's when we started to see things go up, or the cases of COVID-19 go up in the state. But correlation doesn't always equal causation, right? And what is going on with contact tracing? What are we doing as a state? What's going on in your community? And what can be done to improve contact tracing and make sure that people actually have the data so we can look at it and say, it's the backyard parties. Maybe it's not the restaurants that are causing this. Representative Moody, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. I mean, the biggest problem here is we don't have, contact tracing by its very nature is very decentralized, right? Because you have to get, in El Paso, you have a health authority that gets a case, they do the interview, they do the investigation, and then that's literally what they're doing. They get on the phone and they're calling people and they're trying to figure out connections, how it works. On top of that, you have this strange strand of people who their circle overlaps very, very closely with the circle of people that think they shouldn't wear a mask, that think they shouldn't have to answer questions like this,
Sure.
that they don't want an app on their phone. They think that people are going to implant a chip in them when they get a vaccine for the virus. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I mean, it's very real that that idea is so pervasive among some of the population that they won't actively engage in contact tracing. I downloaded whatever the Apple deal was immediately. I don't know how I'm going to use it or if I can use it or whatever, but I want to make sure that whatever tools are available to help do that, because there are data people that are way smarter than I am and understand data visualization and can do these things to understand how this works. We should be giving that information. I mean, if you've seen successful efforts in other countries, it is very aggressive contact tracing. Mm-hmm. And this virus, I'm speaking like I'm a medical expert. I guess we all are now. But I'm literally just parroting something I've heard from a medical professional, I guess. But if we're not doing that, we're not being aggressive, and we're not being as open with that information as possible, then it is going to be a very bumpy ride to the end of the pandemic. The more we all realize that we're in this together and that sharing this information is a good thing that helps us all. It's actually good for the economy. These are also the same people that saying they want the economy open, but you can't do that unless you have a robust program. But when the messaging comes out we're going to do contact tracing, but it's all voluntary, and they heighten the underline, bold the word voluntary. They highlight this, and that you talk about building confidence in consumers. Like the public hears that message and they go, "Oh, voluntary. I'm hearing voluntary a million times. Oh, so there must be something wrong with this, and I don't have to participate." And so the messaging is all wrong on this. It's the same problem we had with masking, and the behavioral changes that we have to engage in if we're going to navigate this successfully. Because we don't have a vaccine, the only thing we have is our behavioral changes, right? So we have to invest heavily in that, and that's spending our time, energy, and talent elevating those messages. It's okay, but we don't have leadership that's doing that right now, honestly.
I appreciate what you're saying, Representative Moody, about, we all have to do our part. That's been kind of a key messaging from TRA from the beginning. We rolled out what we call our Texas Restaurant Promise before dining rooms were even allowed to reopen, because we knew that in order to welcome customers back, we had to be prepared to show them what we were going to do to keep them safe. And at the same time, to set expectations so they understand what they need to do when they walk in our doors to keep people safe. And I think we get a little frustrated sometimes when the answer from some is just close down business, because that may slow the numbers for a point, but unless we build up the testing, unless we build up the contact tracing, we can't stay closed down forever, right? And so it goes back to, what are we all doing to do our part to keep folks safe? So I appreciate that. Senator Flores, anything you want to add on contact tracing?
Well, that is a big contentious issue with a lot of people, and I understand what contact tracing is. I used to work for the Brucellosis Project, and which we had in agriculture, where it's a basic tool of epidemiology, or the tracking of disease source. I understand that. Indicious and TDEM, both of them are, they're handling that program, and they're subject matter experts in that. I think and yes, it is voluntary, and there's no one going to force that or violate anybody's constitutional rights. But I understand what it is from an epidemiological standpoint. The primarily is that when the restaurants, at least in my experience, thus far. Practice the social distancing. The employees are taking all the measures as recommended by DISHIS and the CDC. I've been to many restaurants, and yes, I went and got tested myself, the other day, and yet with all the places that I've been and people that I've contacted, using good common sense, washing your hands and distancing and thing. I mean, I'm negative, thank God, but most of the places that I frequent are using, restaurants that I've frequented are using very responsible. They're going out of their way even, we're just making their job twice as hard, but they care for their clients. And so I've not heard as much of blaming restaurants for spikes in COVID. I've had some constituents say, well, in our area, we think that they are, and you should close it down. But then again, there's no proof to that. And using that tool in epidemiology is if you have someone that was infected from that source, and so on and so forth. So to say that restaurant or this restaurant, I don't know that that's going to be a result of pure contact tracing. It'd be more of whether I go into a place that we're all packed in there like a crate, nobody's using any practices whatsoever, or then yeah, that would be suspect. But I wouldn't frequent that place either, So yes, it is currently right now handled, as a epidemiological tracking tool. Tracking tracking not a good word. I would say it was more like tracing the source of infection. But it's currently, you're free to say yes, you're free to say no, and constitutional rights are not really at issue when it's done correctly.
Thank you for that, Senator. Representative Gonzalez, anything to add on contact tracing?
I mean, no, but one of the things I do think is important for us, and Joe and the senator kind of touched on this, is really how much of this is a team effort, right? And again, on this building confidence and all of us playing a role. And if we want to have an economy, then we have to have that confidence, and we have to have that confidence if we're all doing our parts in getting tested, and when we're with people being responsible about that. And so there's so many levels to this. But one of the things I think I encourage everybody in Texas to think about is how we could not politicize this issue, right? I think when we start to politicize it, that's when we start to see the breaking apart of the strategies to build the economy and keep Texans safe, right? And so for the sake of our restaurant industry and for all the industries, there's ways that we can say, like, hey, contract tracing isn't like the boogeyman, right? There's ways to have balanced and regulated contract tracing in order to do, and I think if people understood, if I do contract tracing, I can help the economy. And for some reason, there seems to be a disconnect. Like, contract tracing exists in its own little world, but I think people would be maybe more eager to participate voluntarily in some of that if they could see, like, here's how I'm helping, who I'm helping restaurants, I'm helping farmers, I'm helping, and if you could understand all of those dynamics, I think that's when we see the best of Texans come out, that the people are much more willing to do the right thing when they feel, and it's true, because they will be helping other people, helping other Texans.
So it basically comes back down to what Representative Moody was saying about communication and messaging. So
always goes back to Joe Moody.
So so good at creating, messaging. Maybe you could help us out and come up with some sort of campaign for us. That would be amazing.
Not to give you more work, Joe Moody.
Yeah, right. Kelsey,
I'll bill for it.
We'll pay you in tacos.
We'll pay you in Austin tacos. How about that, Moody?
Oh, yes.
I was wondering how long Anna would let that go before bringing it
That
up.
was the best. I wish we could share screen that tweet right now. It was the best tweet in the history of tweets. I am here for that tweet.
I'll get it. I'll go get it. Kelsey, you asked the next serious question. I'll find the tweet.
In all of my time on Twitter, I have gotten, I think before that, maybe a third of the interactions was the top. And then I talk about tacos in Austin and I got like 1,000 interactions.
Nothing, gets people going quite like tacos.
Man, I tell you what.
Truth. That is actually the best statement ever. Nothing gets people going quite like tacos. Although, let me just say, El Paso / West Texas, because I'm from Clint, tacos are the best.
All right, we're going to keep moving because I feel like if we stay on tacos, we're not going to get anything else done this meeting. So let's talk about a very specific issue where the ledge might be able to help us. Right now, under the governor's current executive orders, he made the decision to keep restaurants open at up to 50% capacity and close bars. TRA, we of course want to see all of our partners in the food and beverage industry open safely, but we understand that's where we're at now. That's based on science and the medical advice. So we support that. But we have seen a very real problem where many of our, what we would all call restaurants, have been labeled as bars simply because a little bit more of their revenue comes from selling alcoholic beverages. Maybe they sell nice wine, craft beer, craft cocktails, and that just tips the balance a little bit. And so suddenly, much to their surprise, TABC was telling them that they're a bar and they had to close with a few hours notice. So that's an issue where we're engaged with the governor's office, as many on this webinar know. And we've just asked for a simple clarification, and we've put out a different test that we think kind of is a better barometer for if a business is really a restaurant versus a bar. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. So Representative Gonzalez, I'll start with you. So you get to go first this time.
Damn it. No. I think, so Joe can attest to this. I think language is very important. And I also, so what you're really talking about is we've had this word, restaurants, and it has been defined by this through rules, regulations, and maybe in statute. I don't even know where it's at. And so it's not in statute. Great. Yeah. That's actually good because that means we can change things now as opposed to not until we get into session. And we all know the next legislative session is going to be really difficult. So I think that's a really great way for kind of going to what Joe Moody says, using the innovative moments like this and kind of thinking out of the box during this global pandemic to ensure that we aren't stuck in maybe archaic ways of thinking that are very limiting to the realities that we need to address what's happening in society right now. As a person who enjoys fine wine, but can't afford it all the time, I definitely realize how that can really make a difference in the ways in which a business structure exists. And so I'm glad that y'all are offering this issue up, and I think it's completely reasonable for us to, some of these, and all parts of public policy, definitions have existed within our rules and rulemakings for decades without being re-examined. And especially if there's a moment to re-examine it, this is the moment to do that.
That's great. Yeah, and part of this issue, surprisingly, is that these really aren't definitions in statute. And so when the governor had to come up with some way to define them, he kind of had to make it up on the fly in his executive order. And so that's kind of how we landed in this spot. But we might need to change that next session and get something in statute so that if something like this comes up again, we kind of have already thought through it. But anyways, that I appreciate that greatly. Representative Moody, any thoughts on the restaurant versus bar debacle, I'll call it?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is TABC they're the police in this instance, right? And we know the police can enforce whatever law they want. So, in fact, a lot of these changes that we've seen during the pandemic, right? So the liquor to go, or being able to bundle, food together and sell it out of the restaurant, all those things a lot of those aren't, and you won't find them in an executive order. They're essentially telling the enforcement agency, hey, don't enforce that law right there. Let them get away with it for now, right? And so let's do it in a way that makes sense. And so if you provided something to the governor's office that is a better barometer for that, then let's use that, because we don't need to. This goes into the lane of let's get out of the way, right? If we are doing things safely and soundly, and my family and I have gone out mainly because I think that I think we're gonna be living with this for a while. And so my point was, we have to, my kids 6 and 4, they need to know what it's like to wear a mask as they walk in to a restaurant, to be respectful of other people's space, to understand what spreading germs are, to understand how to wash their hands for 20 seconds, which is a challenge, by the way. So those are all things that and so I go out and I try, to reinforce these behavioral things with my kids, and they do a very good job of it. So I know that the 40 somethings out there that are not being compliant can learn as well. But no, the point is, let's get out of the way on this. And if they're following the guidelines on the health and safety front, then let's stay out of that lane as much as we can.
Thank you. Senator Flores, any thoughts on this issue?
Could be, and a number of the points, it's during an emergency proclamation, the governor has a broad authority, and I would assure that there's going to be discussions in the next session about that, some of the granting of authority. But then again, it's statutory, and it's designed generally for hurricanes, floods, and things of that nature. Pandemics, fall in there as well. But currently, we are under the emergency proclamation, so a lot of things can be suspended. But at that same time, that's always a good practice of government. I've been in service in one form or another in government for over 30 years. But to look at, you have regulatory authority, and then you have statute. Regulatory authority under TABC can be examined and changed annually by rule. And then of course what they won't change by rule, then we can change biannually by statutory authority. But in this particular case, where TABC operates in a number by rule, which authority is granted by statute. But it's very healthy for any organization, but especially government, to look at regulations routinely and decide whether they're relevant to the current situation. And once upon a time, you had to tie up your horse there at the county courthouse, and that there's no reason for that law to be in effect to this day. But in some places, it's still there. But in this case, when we look at the 51%, well, how did we arrive at the 51%? What's the logic for that? And ask those questions. And if it needs to be adjusted, we adjust it. If we're looking at liquor to go, and the governor himself would say, we probably need to keep that. Well, that's another example. Foods are looking at different ways for our restaurants to be innovative, as the speaker said. So routine examination of agency policy or regulation is very healthy, and this actually amplifies our opportunity to be able to look at these barriers that may exist to our businesses, that may not be reasonable, in 2020, but they probably were when they were drafted in 1999 or something. Maybe there was a reason why they had to have to be a reason for everything. And if it cannot be explained why they're doing that or why that regulation exists, then it shouldn't exist, is the way my experience in government was. If you can't explain to me why we have that regulation, then why are we doing it? And I think we need to work forward again with your expertise and recommendations as subject matter experts to see what works and what doesn't work, whether it's regulatory or statutory. There's two different avenues to address either or. And but right now we are under the emergency proclamation, so a lot of innovative things can happen under that authority.
Well, that is a perfect segue to alcohol to go, which you so nicely teed up for us, Senator Flores. So as y'all know, Governor Abbott issued a waiver pretty early on in the crisis, allowing restaurants to add alcohol to go for their takeout and delivery options. And then we went back and were able to expand that to mixed drinks so that a restaurant can, make their classic margarita recipe that they hold close to their hearts and mix it for you, seal it. We've got several kind of safety pieces in that. So it has to be sealed, it has to be in a bag, it has to be in a zip tied, it has to be in your trunk. So kind of several steps to make sure we don't have a drinking and driving situation. We're also working to get growlers added to that waiver so that a restaurant can fill a growler of craft beer and send that home in a takeout option as well. Would love to hear your thoughts on if we can get that enacted into law and make this a permanent option so that we can continue the innovation and the really exciting things that are happening.
Well, I would say that, you know, it's everything, we have to be able to have, you know, our eyes wide open, and if it's working, and there's again, no explanation as to why we're doing that, you know, and which should happen. You know, why are you doing that? I don't know, but it's tradition, you know, but that's not going to work, you know, but so if it's something that is working, then why revert to it? I mean, I'd be open to working with my colleagues to, you know, to look at anything that is innovative and especially relevant to, you know, today, and
Awesome.
something that we can intelligently articulate why we're doing it.
The alcoholic beverage code is full of those riddles, but we can start with alcohol to go.
The law, I mean, it surely shouldn't be a riddle. I mean, if there's no reason to do it, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
And especially when there are laws and regulations that would impede the ability of our business owners and to be able to do business safely and to, you know, continue to we not be, well, we got enough barriers, let's not us be the barriers for success.
Representative Gonzalez.
I'm going to say something a little controversial. Surprise. So one thing I'm very careful about is not over-promising to people, because I think one of the reasons that I saw a study that said that people distrust elected officials, and I think one of the reasons that distrust has happened over time, I know you laugh, Anna, but like, I wonder why. But one of the reasons I feel it's happened is because we have over-promised at times, right? And so for specifically going into next legislative session, we have no idea what we're going into. We have no idea how we're going to have meetings yet. We have no idea what the budget's going to be like yet. If there's a $20 billion deficit, a $40 billion deficit, or a $5 billion deficit. We have no idea how we're going to do redistricting. There's so many questions. And so I know there's eagerness on this issue, and I hear it and I understand that. But I also want to be very honest and real about the fact that we are going into probably one of the most difficult legislative sessions that we're going to see in a long time. And so not to say it's not important to people, but I also just want to create the reality of 140 days and some really critical issues that I think sometimes will just supersede and take up all the oxygen in the room. And so not to say I don't care, but I just really, really want to be very honest about how difficult next session is going to be, so we're prepared for that.
That's really helpful, Representative. Thank you for saying that. And I was laughing, you're right, because I'm sure you get that a lot. The great thing is that Kelsey's done an amazing job and already wrote sort of the guidelines for it. We got a lot of support from the 3 tiers of government, or three tiers of alcohol. And then to get it signed by the governor was actually pretty surprising and positive. So that's the good thing, is that a lot of the stuff that we will be looking to do in the 21 session has already been written. It doesn't take a lot of extra effort in terms of research and study and, you know, taking any of your legislative aids and pushing them towards this issue versus, you know, getting relief to families and businesses. That obviously will need to be prioritized. So that's a good thing. It's a lot of this is already written and ready to go.
Yeah, we actually managed to get all 3 of the alcohol tiers on agreement on this issue, which is kind of
that never happens.
Yes.
What? There's a grievance?
Yeah.
So Kelsey, with the last couple of minutes that we have on this, I was wondering if we could talk about, one of my favorite issues, which is delivery.
Of course, Anna.
Thank you. Okay, so third-party delivery companies, I'm sure you guys are aware, you have plenty of restaurants in your district that talk about third-party delivery. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the fees that are charged by these third-party companies per delivery order can reach as high as 35% that the restaurant is paying. The restaurant ends up paying quite a bit of these fees actually, and they're not put on the consumer as often. Sometimes, these third-party companies start delivering food from restaurants to consumers without even the restaurant knowing, which we think is intellectual property abuse, but it's not great. It's not a great way to start a relationship, certainly in a business environment. So I'm just kind of curious, and maybe we can start with Representative Moody. What are you hearing from your constituents about third-party delivery? And do you see this as being an issue going forward, especially considering how tight things are for restaurants as they maneuver through the pandemic?
Wow, I didn't realize that they can engage with your business without some sort of affirmative, because they're putting logos and branding and menus on there.
Yes.
Well, first of all, that should not be allowed. If you want to, here's the thing, because you're the business owner, right? You make decisions for what's best for your business. You may think that this is something, irrespective of the fee structure. If you figure this is a way that I can kind of piece things together as we navigate through this, and I want to engage in this, more power to you. You shouldn't have it thrust upon you. That seems, I don't know, that just seems backwards to me. So first of all, would certainly want to make sure there's some sort of affirmative action that the restaurant or business has to take to be a part of these, because the other part of it, for their branding and for their quality control.
Exactly.
So I order from this place from I'll pick on Leo again, from L&J, right? And when I get it, it's cold, or it's this, or it's that. Like, so it's not what I want, and not the experience that I would get clearly sitting in the restaurant. Am I going to hold that against third-party delivery app service or the restaurant? I mean, that's really bad. It's bad PR for companies in an environment that's already difficult. So that goes to that part of it. Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked, but that's a big issue.
I'm glad you're outlining that. That's our struggle as well.
That's unreal. The other part is you want safety. You want safety and security, because you're sending people to people's homes and businesses and otherwise, touch points and health and all these things. So all those things need to be checked. I don't know that, there certainly is a reasonable fee that should come along with that. But it's one of those things I have to look more into. I mean, at a certain point that becomes untenable, and so it's not really a solution. Although to get your food out to folks, it may be one of the only tools you can utilize, because then the other option you got is hiring folks on yourself, and then you got the liability issues on top of that. Man, it's a Pandora's box.
Because you didn't want to leave your house.
Yeah.
Real challenge, and I think part of where we have to educate folks on this is because we like to talk about the free market and consumer choice and all of that, but when you have an industry that its dining rooms are required to close by the government, right? You have pretty limited options, pretty limited bargaining power with how you go about this, and we're seeing consolidation. Just the other day, there was a big announcement about one big third-party app acquiring another. So, when we talk about free markets, key to that is competition. And we don't really have true competition in this market, particularly when a business doesn't even have any say on if they're signed up or not, right? So it's a real challenge, and one that Anna is always very good about shining a light on.
No, these are all tools that we should, we get to utilize, but we got to be eyes wide open on some of this stuff. So.
Yep. Okay.
I didn't mean to blather on for so long.
No, not at all. Representative Gonzalez or Senator Flores, anything to add on third-party delivery fees?
No, but I just read the thing on that Vanessa put in, and hi Vanessa, about this is something I'm really learning about, but I can see how problematic a lot of these infrastructures are, and so just thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sorry, Vanessa, and we're here to help how we can.
Well, and from my perspective, I've not had anybody mention this issue to me as a problem. As a matter of fact, it's something that, again, I'm learning of as well, but no restaurants, big and small, that I know have reached out on this issue at all to me. But certainly it's also driven by the market too. If they're not they're business folks dealing with other business folks. If they're not working out, then don't use them. But then again, from what I'm hearing, is some places don't have an opportunity to use but them if they were going to engage in that type of delivery service. But yeah, certainly what we want is to make sure that the end user gets the product that they ordered and that they're satisfied and it's safely delivered. So I'm sure Health and Human Services or the local health departments would be interested in that. If those occurrences are happening, I would encourage folks to report that to their health departments in their jurisdictions to address that. And of course, there's also would possibly be civil and criminal penalties for anybody tampering with food or poisoning it or anything like that. But ultimately, it's a business decision between the business owner and the delivery company. But other than that, I've had no complaints on that issue so far.
All right. I want to be respectful of y'all's time, but I know we got started a little bit late, so I just want to kind of give everyone a chance to kind of wrap up. For my part at TRA, I just want to remind everyone we have our Texas Restaurant Survival Plan. For folks watching, please make sure you read through that. Please make sure you contact your elected officials. As you can see from our very gracious panelists today, they're engaged on these issues, they care about these issues, but they need to hear from you. And we're really, I like what Representative Moody said about, we're gonna need both help from the government and we're gonna need government to get out of our way at times. And I think there's really pieces of both of that in this proposal. We've identified some funding needs that would be really helpful in getting us through this immediate kind of dark spot. As I said, we're out of PPP money, sales are down. We know the state got $6 billion in CARES Act that's kind of sitting out there. And the federal government has made very clear that grants to businesses that were closed because of COVID is an eligible use of that funding. We think it's very appropriate. Again, these businesses didn't lose money because of a bad business decision. They lost money because the government ordered them to close for an extended period of time. So, I'll put a plug in for that. There's a piece about third-party delivery fees. There's a piece about extending the alcohol to go waiver, eviction, foreclosure relief. All of these things are going to be critical for our industry. So everyone watching, please continue to advocate for yourself, for your industry. And just thank you to our panelists here. Anna, I'll turn it over to you. And then panelists, if y'all want to close us off with any ending remarks, that would be welcomed as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey. It's been great to be on this town hall with you guys. I know we're going to have more, but it's always really nice to put faces with names. So thanks y'all for joining us. For everyone on the webinar, remember our TRA Marketplace announcement. We've decided to go virtual. We have a full week of education, meetings with senators and representatives, board members. It's going to be a great time. So go check that out at tramarketplace.com. And then let's start with Representative Gonzalez, if you have any closing remarks.
I just want to say thank you for all your advocacy and leadership and hard work. And I'm really grateful that I got to have this hour with my colleagues here. And so really, if you would have told us in January that we were going to be going through this, nobody thought we would be here. This is all of us, I think, and I want to show a lot of grace to everybody in this moment. I think everyone's trying to do their best. And so all we can do is say, hey, things aren't working. Let's try to fix it. And I genuinely believe there's so many of our leaders who do want to fix things. And so thank you for your work. And we're going to continue to try to figure it all out.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Moody?
I'm going to continue to let Mary Gonzalez figure this all out.
All right, well, I'm in good hands then.
I said we, Joe, we.
Well, that's my part of it. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to actively listen to the advice that you give me.
Can you tell we're actually friends? Like we actually just genuinely love hanging out.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be with y'all. There's just I don't have a lot to close on other than there's a lot of hurt going on. It's just pain. There's different pains that different people are feeling in different ways, and they're navigating this in the best way they know how. And so what I would encourage everybody to do, and in our community, I mean, about a year ago, we suffered an incredible act of hate and violence. And it seems like since then, we've never had the opportunity to heal and have gone from one crisis to the next. And so all I ask for everybody is these are trying times and these are tough. And everyone you encounter, whether you know it or not, is dealing with this in a very real way. And so to the extent we can, let's set aside frustrations or politics or whatever the case may be, and extend love into this environment that we're in, because it's very difficult. It's going to be a very difficult road from here on out. And so some people just may need a smile out of you, whether they can see it or not behind your mask, but they need lift each other up. Let's do our best that we can, even in difficult times. And that's ultimately what will kind of get us through this. We're going to have these conversations about economic packages that we're going to put together, and those are important, and we're going to get through them. And I think that, to Mary's point, we're going to prioritize the things that can have the most impact and do the most good as quickly as possible. And I think there's certainly pieces of that we've talked about here today. But on top of that, we've got to remember that we're all human beings struggling to kind of get through this at the same time. So treat each other with love and respect, and that's gonna take us a long way. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Couldn't agree more. Senator Flores, you get the last word today.
Thank you. Just what the speaker and Representative Gonzalez have stated, and thank you all again for the opportunity to be able to visit with you. Your input is very important. Yes, Representative Gonzalez is correct. This is going to be a very brass tacks session, and we'll. But I remain ever optimistic that I'm working with folks in the best state in the union, and who have gone through crisis after crisis and come out on top, especially when we work together, as the speaker has said. That there's times that like these, everyone's wound pretty tight, and we don't need to contribute to that. What we need to do is move forward together to get out of this fog and go into the sunlight. And I think we can demonstrate. We've demonstrated we can do that, and I look forward to working with my colleagues both in the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat, to be able to get back into the light.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you everyone for viewing. We'll post this on YouTube if you missed it. And everyone, just take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.